it's great that we have women from around the world as well, which is
Absolutely.
fantastic. So Lynn, before we get into some of the logistics and the topics and all of that kind of stuff, maybe you can start just by telling us what the book is about, because I think that's actually the core to some of this this discussion. And by the way, I'm not going to only be the only one asking questions here. So we'll have questions towards the end. But if you feel a violent need to interrupt, just make sure you can make use of the chat box over there, and you can ask any questions. I'm very happy to have a sort of flow as we have this discussion. But the key question initially is what is the book about? Just for people who are going to read it, that haven't read it.
Okay, the premise of the book that fascinated me and kept me going was, what if the wandering Jew was a woman? And not just any woman, a feisty, time-traveling, foul-mouthed, sexually charged picaro who wanders through the ages at the behest of the muses of antiquity in her quest to become the 10th muse. So that in a tweet nutshell is how I've actually explored it. And of course, in a serio-comic way, it's funny. It's taking a very serious subject of anti-Semitism through the ages, through the mythology, if you like, of the Wandering Jew, which was an anti-Semitic myth created in the Middle Ages and kind of rear and post-engineered to, Jews killed Christ, we poisoned the wells, we eat babies on our matzah, all this kind of thing. And my own childhood in Scotland, where I was accused of killing Jesus at the age of 6, which upset me greatly because he was already crucified and I really didn't understand what I had to do with that. So I wanted to explore the nature of anti-Semitism, which is the nature of otherness, the nature of scapegoating. And Wanda B. Lazarus became a character who's in a way my doppelganger, but far cheekier than I am, who is accidentally cursed with immortality, which you'd have to read the book to find out how and why, and in fact dies at the end of each chapter, which is set very much in the grit of reality, and returns to a sort of magic realism space called the Pleroma, which is a sort of netherworld where the 9 muses, the Greek muses, who've also all lost their names through history, who are a bunch of mean girls, task her to return each time for a musical boon. So it's quite a mythical mashup of Jewish history, Greek mythology, world history, and a lot of fun. I hope so. It's funny. Did you think it was funny, Benj?
I mean, it was funny, and what's nice is that there's some great, aside just from the feminist angle, but if you're a South African and even a South African member of the South African Jewish community, I think that you will definitely find some bits and pieces to pick on as well, which is fun as well. Now, Lynn, a key part of the process, as Tracy mentioned, was this master's program that you did. Yes. And I'm going to come back to it, but I wanted to just get a sense quickly, initially, from you, about what that was all about and how it informed the creation of the book, because there was a time element to it. There's all sorts of stuff to it. So I want to hear the process as well.
Okay, so I'll say it because I know the audience aren't just writers. So there was, in a business sense, in a way, I needed to have the structure and discipline of not just my mind sitting in a dark room. For those of you who know me, I'm a bit of an extrovert, and I had to find my introvert to go and sit in a dark room, as I call it, and every single morning or just about write a piece. So the Master of Arts at WITS required a work of fiction or creative fiction over about a 2-year period. It took me 2.5 years to write the book. Every second week we would go to a seminar session. We would have our own book torn to pieces. We would have to read, not torn to pieces, critically analyzed. And the questions would be asked from a group of other writers who had all read it the previous week. We would then have to read ours, read theirs, do our research, return every 2 weeks, and then we would present our work. So it wasn't just isolated. There was a kind of a range of people, which then leads one to say, what are you going to include and exclude? If another lecturer doesn't particularly like, for example, the sex scenes or something like that, I had to decide if I wanted to keep them or not, or the linearity of the book, or whatever the particular issues were. So, and again, to writers out there or anyone out there, you can't write a 400-page book overnight. I'm usually a deadline person. Like, when's the deadline? Okay, it's close to the deadline as possible. I've learned to bring my deadlines into my daily life. And then after I wrote the MA, which I did well, as you said, by a series of network coincidences, I found my editor, Alison Lowry, who's one of the best editors in this country. I couldn't believe that I got the job. And so before I even had a publication or a publisher, I worked through the book again, because a published novel, a published work at university isn't necessarily a publishable book in the outside world. So I spent 2.5 years writing and 2.5 years editing, and a year in COVID, which isn't supposed to count, and then launched it in the middle of a pandemic.
I love what you say about the deadlines, because sometimes my idea of it, not my idea, but I actually like this. I like deadlines because of like the whooshing sound that they make as they go past. So I suppose that a program like this is also helpful to actually lock that down and make sure, because as one writing expert says, writing is feral. If you don't do it, it runs away, and it can be very hard to capture again. And so that sounded like it's a very big part of making sure this was a successful project.
Just to interject very quickly with an anecdote. At one point, there was one writer. There were about 8 of us in the class, and I won't mention her name or the lecturer's name, but she was brilliant, and she would come to these sessions with 2 pages of absolute brilliance. And one of the lecturers asked her at one point, why have you written so little? And she said, no, well, she was inspired last night, and she'd just put a couple of pages. And he said, well, I hope that when you're next inspired, you're sitting at your desk. Meaning that, because inspiration is absolutely essential. I don't think without the purpose and the sense of meaning that you can do it. But the inspiration is one thing. Sitting down at the typewriter and bleeding is how my uncle Ernest Hemingway put it. And that is what it is. It's blood from my soul. Getting a drink of water.
So that gives you a bit of a sense about the process. Oh, I see we've lost Lynn there. She's getting some water. Okay. So I think this gives you a bit of the process and the book side of things. And again, feel free to ask questions if you're the literary type. And I see we do have a few on here, so feel free. But I want to kind of get onto the business end, so to speak, of the discussion for a group like Ord. There's a sense in which sometimes people just see books and you buy them and you kind of think, well, people write them and then they sort of transvaporate, to use a Harry Potter term, onto the shelves at exclusive books, and then people buy them. But actually that hasn't quite been your experience, and I suspect it's not an experience for a first-time author of most types. So talk to us about the publishing and then distribution side of this, because I think that's really interesting.
Okay, I'm going to tie it into, so for those of you who don't know me, I've been a copywriter all my life, working for agencies, then going freelance, then becoming a producer, then seeing the gap in the market. And because I have to earn a living from it, it's my skills and my talent and my expertise applied to marketing and advertising. Here I sit and write a book. Literally, it's almost like a different side of my personality, sitting down in that dark room, as I have for years and years. I had a publisher, which was very lucky, which was a pitched situation. I tried overseas, I tried querying. I didn't get, it's very, very, very difficult to get a publisher. I had written a children's book some 10 years ago that I self-published. So I've tried that route. It was a very difficult route as well, without distributors, without connections, without a network. So this time I wanted to have a publisher. And and if you're out there, Colleen, I had met Colleen. Colleen introduced me to Alison, my editor, without any guarantee of taking it up. And then in 2018, she had a submissions window and I submitted. I had done the work in advance. The publisher, everybody watches television, and you get these advances and suddenly you're world famous and you're on Trevor, and that disabuse you of that notion. There's a publicist, which in our terms is usually called PR, but the publicist is a person who's connected with the press. I'm connected with nobody other than my social media network, which I'm busy expanding. So in other words, I had to gather all of my 40 years of marketing experience and see how it applied to an industry I know absolutely nothing about. And I think that's why for Ort, it's an interesting discussion, because this is a new if you want to call it a new career for me. It is not monetizing me yet. It will. The pace of advertising is from brief to broadcast in 3 weeks. You get the brief, you write the storylines, you write, I do this for a living. And the publishing process is slower, maybe because I'm older and I don't know how this should work, but you don't get a bestseller in South Africa overnight from a local publisher. So there are things like agents out there. You're in a constant state of rejection a little bit. People say, start gathering rejection slips, start growing a pair, as they call it. I know a lot of authors, and a lot of authors are introverts. Put yourself out there. That is the Stephen Fry quote that everybody speaks about. I put myself out there. I put myself at risk of rejection, as I have over and over. And lo and behold, out of all the boys in the world, my fairy godfather loved my book. It doesn't mean it's going to be an international bestseller either, but I'm now going to take that one luck, if you like, which is preparation meets opportunity. Luck is not a thing that comes from Jesus or God. It comes from being ready at any given moment. So a lot of, I can go on and on, but I'll let you segue, is I didn't realize this was going to be a career. I didn't write this book for money. I didn't write this book for fame. I didn't write this book for acknowledgement. I wrote it because I needed to write it. I'm very grateful and blessed that it's going out there, because of course you write for people to read, but I didn't consider, in fact, until you and I started speaking, that it was actually a business. And so I've made it my business to turn it into my business with the help of my publisher, my publicist. I need some social media smarts. I've started to create Bernie memes. If anyone who follows me on Facebook, of Bernie holding the book, coming into current. In fact, Harry and Meghan, in fact, had read chapter 1 as a result of what happened with Oprah last night. So I'm being very cheeky. I've got Mona Lisa holding the book. I've got 13 review quotes ready to go out as soon as the Stephen Fry quote goes out, which I have one opportunity to get a wish for my fairy godfather, because he has 13 million followers and I have 3. So that's a big nutshell, and it's all very tumult at the moment, because I'm seeing in the fugue of this and the false dreams of it that I've got to do a lot of hard work to make this work.
Well, I think that's quite an interesting point. Again, people think, I think that the option applies to whatever product you're selling, right?
Yes.
Whether it's a sort of niche literary book about Jewish history, or widgets, or anything. There's a process around marketing and distribution, and putting in the sweat equity to make sure it's a success. It's not just about writing it. So maybe let's break down some of those things that have been successful, and what you have learned, and what you happened. I mean, you mentioned social media, and that in some respects a big leveler in the world today, because anyone can have a Twitter account or an Instagram account or a Facebook, and anyone can use it. Some people are scared of it. You don't know what, if you might say something wrong, or no one will care. So what's been your experience sort of engaging in social media?
Okay, you're starting at the end and working your way backwards, which is okay, because for all of you out there, when Benji and I described this, I went and took my entire life experience and put it into an acronym, which I sent you, which I used. We can get this to you guys later. It's called DNA Crib Flips. And each letter stands for something that I've learned along the way that I can apply from my business experience to my book experience. And so S at the end of the flips is social, is your BFF. I don't want you to interrupt now, Lynn, but my sister is online now. And for example, they started a group called What Do You See From Your Window under COVID. They have 600,000 members on that group. Who are kind to each other, who show each other pictures of what they saw from their window. It kind of struck a chord in the world. And my sister is now famous on Facebook, but there are 600,000. I don't have anything near that. And it's very, very depressing to send out your best life quote and you get 2 likes, one of whom is your mother. So, I must say this to other writers as well. I'd spent 3 years building up, I suppose, the algorithm, if you want to call it that. So I'm in touch with a lot of authors. And so it's almost like what you'd call in business a trade. I'm interested in the trade. I'm interested in Helen Moffat's blog. I'm interested in Fiona Snickers. I'm interested in Mojaji. I'm not interested in people's pictures of my dogs. Yes. So if you are, and I'm not an expert in social media, Hayes, I'm learning. So little Linny me's dog Yoko, who's sitting looking pretty, can get more likes than Stephen Fry Love My Book. And in fact, because I'm stalking Stephen Fry, I'm sorry, Stephen, because I'm learning from him. Look, I don't have a broadcast platform. And if you actually look at people who've got tens of thousands of followers, by and large, they've been on television, they've got a radio platform, look at Cliff Central, places like that. So I don't have that, but I do have the N in DNA, which is network. And this is an old cliche that network is net worth. And you again, because Benji's got a different brain from me, said, what about the Jewish community? Now, there are very few Jews in advertising. I don't know any Jewish people in advertising. But now that I'm reaching out to the Jewish community with the book, my network is expanding. Now that I mean, I don't know what Instagram does, but I know I have to do the Instagram thing. But my target market, if you would say, I didn't start with a target market. Now I realize my target market is lovers of literary fiction, feminism, and Jewish studies, perhaps. A lot of my friends have bought the book and can't get through the book, so I put a glossary into the ebook, which is now available. I want people to be able to read it, but I'm not changing anything in it in order for them to be able to read. So, for example, the memes, and the other sort of peasant wisdom about social media is must look pretty. There must be pictures. And I'm a radio girl, so I always thought the words mattered. But now I've started memes of the Wanda book in the Machau caves. I've got a little meme for each chapter of the book, which may not make, I don't know if it makes somebody go and read the book, but they certainly will look out for my little tweets or my Facebook. Facebook is where I share myself. And I don't think that you can be insincere because it's picked up. You have to come from it. So a bit of a personality, which I can, and little stories of my life. And we got robbed the other day and Yoko's getting new shoes. And in between now, especially that we're marketing it, Wanda Lazarus is a character who I can draw on and expand my base. But I don't think that you should want, especially, I mean, over 40 or whatever that we are, that we're not native to the platforms. I think it's very important because in a sense, you have your own publication sitting there waiting for you.
Yeah, I think in a way, you're kind of a dual publisher because you published a book, but you're now being a publisher on social media and having to actually curate the voice for each different one. What you say on Twitter, it's not the same as what you say on Facebook or Instagram. And I think that's actually been one of the lessons just watching you that I think other people have said to me around social media is that you don't have to be on everything, actually. I mean, you do have to, you said, well, I have to be on Instagram. But the truth is, you've been able to use your Facebook very effectively because you've got a lot of people on there, lots of people who know you, interested in engaging. And actually, Facebook has been your platform. So as much as you want to be out there, you've actually been able to focus on a platform and really actually make it work for you.
But then I also want to add this. It takes me years to do a website. I don't know why. It's probably because I'm antediluvian 18th century. But Mike Said, if you're there, Mike Said and I sat down and we did a small, tiny author's page for Lynn Joffe. It's very difficult. I can talk about Creatrix, my company, come and buy, sell, but it's me. And there's always a little bit of scam, a little bit of shyness, which is kind of immodest modesty. But when I eventually sent the query to Stephen to say, read the book, I had my website ready. I had my examiner's report. There's a reflective essay that one has to do in the Wits space, which I had written from my character's point of view. So there was enough out there for the stranger to make a call. And in fact, websites, they say a website is a brochure. I'm now ready because we're relaunching, and the ebook is a new thing, and it can't go out onto Amazon because there's a whole kerfuffle in the back of the publishing world that says if you want to get publishers overseas, you can't go on Amazon because it destroys your chances of being published on the ground elsewhere. So, but in learning that, if you're interested, my website now is ready to be to amplify, if you like. The ebook, my Facebook. I'm not that concerned about my Facebook reputation, but yet, in fact, the other day, Colleen, my publisher, I'd written something very rude about something about the inauguration. And she wrote to me and said, just consider that you're now a Majaji author. In other words, I'm not just Lynn talking crap to everyone. I've actually got a kind of responsibility to the book, to the publisher. I'm very rebellious, so I'm going to go, I'll write what I like. But if it comes back to bite me just because I've been rude about, some little kid at an inauguration, I'm more conscious of what I put out there now. And I'm having to learn a whole new realm of, I haven't considered that everyone on Facebook is a publisher of some kind, right?
Yeah, and if they get annoyed with you, they might publish something else. Now, let's get off the electronics as well, because you can, if you're that way inclined, actually end up spending all your time talking about social media. But another big part of your marketing push has been the books yourself, right? So there are some in stores, but you've been doing a lot to sell them in your network, and also to promote them in your network. In a way, the book has almost become a kind of a very large, thick, much more worded business card that you've been able to engage people with. So let's talk about that for a minute.
You put it to me when we were rehearsing for this, and you said it's a very expensive, very prestigious business card. And the fact that you put that into my mind, and again, to all you guys, speak to people, get their input. It never occurred to me. But it's funny because people I worked with 30, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, it's opened up opportunity because it's an opener. Would you like my book? Someone like Nick Mhlongo, who's a writer who also sells books out of the back of his boot. I have it in a nice little suitcase with a handcuff on it. But wherever I go, I have it ready. It is available in the shops because of the publisher and distributor. Restocking seems to be a challenge for smaller publishers, and I wouldn't have wanted only to sell myself, because I bought them from the publisher. They're called author's copies. I'm on my second batch of 100. I have a Yoko machine that I thought was absolutely beyond my ken. You switch it on, you wave the card over it, and it's sold. So I didn't realize that it could be an income stream. And I'm not selling it on the street, but my makeup artist, if you see my makeup artist who came today, I did a trade exchange for her. She got a book and I got my face looking pretty. So, and shyness cannot be a thing. When I did my children's book, I couldn't ask for money. I just couldn't. I gave away 1,000 books. And now I'm a little more circumspect about that. But yes, because I've done it out of my passion, I mean, P in my little crib flips is purpose over task with passion. If there's a purpose to it, the purpose is I'd like you to read it. The passion is, God, this is a fantastic book. And I mean, which is nice that reviews come because other people say it's fantastic. I can't say it's fantastic. I can say it's finished. I can say it's complete. I can say it's worthy. But the praise, all of that the praise, I believe that women are less prone to praise than men. And I'm learning to be gracious about praise, because I would like her to, you see, it's not me, it's she. The interesting thing about Wanda is that you can praise Wanda. I was just the conduit and the hard worker. She had all the fun.
It's interesting you mentioned Nick, because he's quite a prolific short story killer. So maybe Lynn, just thinking off the top of my head, you should do what they call in the social media sphere a collab with Wanda and one of Nick's short stories. But that's perhaps a discussion.
No, it isn't. Well, just very quickly, I'm meeting Nick tomorrow. That's another thing about Facebook. I don't stalk a lot of people, but your PMs, your DMs are your friend. So I have sent to Stephen Cohen in France. I have sent to Candice Braitz in Germany. I have sent to Helen Moffat in Cape Town. I've actually reached the book. Fortunately, my business, and again to you guys out there, the business is holding down the finance and the real life. The book is, in a way, the fantasy product. But Nick and PJ Wofferking and I are having a meeting tomorrow afternoon because of you, to see what we can do to collaborate. Because there's another thing in South African literature that there seems to be a little bit of apartheid going on from the traditional white festivals, and now the Soweto festival that white people can't go on. And I think that's absolute nonsense. And I would like to be at my ripe age, reaching out to all authors. And yeah, I'm meeting Nick tomorrow and I will bring this up with him.
I think that that's a fantastic, and I think that it also talks about, how you can think out the box in terms of promoting your product. Once had someone who told me that in Israel, it's the startup nation, but in South Africa, it's a do-it-yourself nation. And it sounds to me like that very much has to be the approach, even when it comes to something as high society as literature. Now, let's get away from that. I want to talk about, we spoke a little bit about your advertising affecting the book, your background in business being good for the book. But actually, it seems to me that maybe the book is also teaching you something about your business career, taking that time off to actually do something creative, which I think is sometimes an anathema to business types. It sounds to me like it's given you a whole new perspective on your business side in terms of Creatrix and what you're doing there.
So you guys are not a youngster, even though I look much younger than I am. Like I said, I started off as a copywriter. I became a producer. I always saw the gap for respect for culture and language. So I started Creatrix, and the women who work for me, I'm now working for. So about 3 years ago, we moved into a BEE level 2, 51% female-owned status. It's a very difficult head shift to make. And it was interesting because it coincided with the book, because I spent a lot of my time writing. So I had to separate the writer's head from the business head, if you want, even though I write in the business. And had a bit of a fear that the whole thing could collapse because I wasn't driving. So the others went into the driver's seat, and lo and behold, apart from COVID, I couldn't help that. But the business, the how would you like to call it? The empowerment, literally, the people who could take ownership, who now own the business in the majority shareholding, are now running the business. And I get told to shut up. And I get told that's, I'm a middle-aged white Jewish person who's been in the business for long. All my staff are young Black women who are empowered. They're the directors of the company now. And so what I'm saying is that I don't know what I've learned from the book yet because it's too young, but writing it, and then of course a book launch. I mean, if you look behind me, you'll see my pull-up banner. Now, I wouldn't have put a pull-up banner in a book because, who am I? But in a marketing way, of course you have a pull-up banner and a bookmark and a bag and a postcard. So it's too early to tell yet, but my passion for both, I have to work with a greater balance. I've registered for a PhD this year. I'm going to write another book under the auspices because I like a bit of intellect with my creativity. But, and it sounds like, oh my God, okay, I don't have children. I have dogs. They're my children, but I don't have to educate the children. I have a marriage, which is the meaning and be all of my life, but I don't spend my life, barefoot pregnant in the kitchen. So there's got to be a kind of a life. I've got to live a life. So, for example, a friend of mine 2 years ago said, oh, well, you missed, there was some carnival LGBT thing, some gay rave, whatever it was. And he said to me, oh, Lynn, you missed the rave. I said, no, but you missed what I wrote in chapter 2 about Zenobia, because that's what I was doing with the FOMO that I had to not go out. And in fact, I was in lockdown years before COVID began because I had to sit and focus and concentrate. So I let go of my control of the business, and it's now in joint control. And I'm trying to get back to my writing practice, because after publishing the book and reading it 100 million times and proofreading, I felt like it will never come to me again. And that's another thing I want to say to people. You've got to have your downtime. You've got to have your fallow period. You can't keep the peak or you'll burn out. And I think I did have a bit of burnout at the end of the year. I'm just getting into burn in now. Bernie.
I mean, what actually, I mean, you can't do an interview these days without asking the C question, how did COVID affect, how did COVID actually affect the rollout of the book, or did it actually present some opportunities?
I think for every human being on earth, it presented something weird. I was supposed to be published in June of last year. As you know, my father passed away in February. and condolences, thank you from everyone. My father passed away in Scotland the day I got my edited manuscript back, which was in February. I then came back, went into a depression, the COVID, acedia, all of that, couldn't look at the book, couldn't face another word of the book. And so what it did was it marinated, because you work with an editor, and the editor is a very active participant. And I wasn't sure about it. And then I went into the whole thing. The book is absolute rubbish, and I've never seen such rubbish. So I was able to go through all the emotions of, I love it, I hate it, it's the best book I've ever read, it's an absolute piece of crap. What is this doing here? Why is this here? So from February to August, it marinated. And then I sat up, bolt upright, and printed it out, read it again, made the changes. So not everyone has the luxury of that. But in retrospect, it wouldn't have been my book had I not had that time. And my publisher was, a lot of people published in COVID and it disappeared. Overseas, here, it was a terrible time. But because I've never published before, I don't know what it's like to be anything other than this. So I think there was a black hole, but as I said to Colleen, my publisher, a launch isn't forever, the book is forever. We're now launching the ebook, which has taken a bit of time to get ready with a glossary, because a lot of people said they wanted a glossary. We'll then move into maybe an audiobook. So COVID was actually a blessing in disguise, actually.
As people who run the Comrades tell me that the problem with running the Comrades the first time is that you don't know about Polly Shorts, but the problem with running Comrade the second time is that you do know about Polly Shorts. So I suppose a certain amount of amateur naivety is probably not a terrible thing in this kind of kind of environment. It's actually interesting what you say. Taking a piece of space in whatever industry. It reminds me that, for example, in book selling, we only sell as a country, I can't remember the stat, like 100,000 books a year, something stupid like that. And to have a bestseller is between 3,000 and 5,000. So it's a really, actually, you're playing in a really small, it looks really big, and it is really big from the creation side, but you're actually playing in quite a small pond of people who are writing and being creative workers. And I think that affects the context of what you have to do.
You see, I didn't know any of this before. And if I had I known exactly what you're saying, would I have written it anyway? Yes, I would have. Did I know that there are no agents in this country? There's one or two literary agents, which you see in the movies all the time. They don't exist here. There's one or two. I got a publisher before I got an agent, which muddies it a little bit, but Colleen we're in a kind of partnership for this book. But South Africa, and as I've been told over and over, South Africa is a tiny little pimple on the boil of literary work. However, COVID allows you to go to a conference in Germany without physically getting on a plane now. So a lot of the connections, and I don't know from before because I wasn't there before, can be made because you don't necessarily have to fly, to Frankfurt and do your schmooze. But the publishers are better connected. But then, so for example, if Penguin South Africa buys your book, it doesn't mean Penguin England will publish it, or Australia or wherever. So that's a whole new, and I'm seeing it as a game. I'm seeing it as a challenge. Somebody once told me, you do not earn money from writing a book. And I thought, well, maybe you can, maybe we will. I don't know, but that wasn't my mode. In fact, my D in DNA crib flips is do what you love and the money will follow. And I live my life, and deadlines. I live my life by that premise, I think.
That's an interesting part of this. And again, I think there is a business lesson here, but I do think it applies to any kind of creative endeavor that one is going to do, whether it's writing a book or making a painting or a song, is getting in contact with that why, and like also why me, right? So and I don't know if this has been something that you struggled with, but I know artists at some point with work is like, well, what does anyone think about what I'm going to say? Do they care about what I'm going to say? Will anyone read it? Are those kind of thoughts things that you've had to fight with in this journey as well?
That's a very difficult question to answer because it's very subjective. The advice, the peasant wisdom of most writers is you write for one person. You write for one person. Now, Alison Lowry didn't exist for the first 2.5 years of my book. So I think I wrote for Michelle Adler, who was one of my lecturers who thought that I thought she was gorgeous. She loved the writing. And just to make Michelle laugh was like the aim of my life. I see Renelle, who I didn't know, she's my Facebook BFF, who loves the book despite the fact that I've never met her. I've seen her once or twice at a book launch. She loves it as much as Michelle loves it. Alison, I think, got to, when you go through the book so many times, what's to love. But I really, and Kurt Vonnegut says, write for one person. He wrote for his sister, and then his sister died, so he wrote for his dead sister. So there's, in a way, what I mean is that you can't be right. It's in the same way as you can't perform for an audience of people. In fact, at the moment I'm talking to you, but I'm aware that there are people listening. So I'm actually speaking to you, Benj, and if I can make you laugh, it's the honor of my life. So and obviously you write for the room, the sessions that I was in, and then they would have an argument about my book, and I'd be going, I don't even know what you're talking about. So my advice to writers is you're writing for one ideal reader, and now I've got ideal non-readers, and I want to seduce them too.
I mean, that's the most Kurt-like quote I think I've ever heard from Kurt. So
it is a Kurt
exactly
quote.
what he would say. I want before we start to take some questions, because we're actually getting up to that part. It just strikes me that the requirement for a good solid amount of chutzpah. I mean, I can't tell you about when I've been sharing the fact that I'm doing this with you, this discussion for Women's Day and whatever. And you've got the picture of Stephen Fry in the book, and some people thought I was going to be interviewing you and Stephen Fry, which would have been very interesting. But yeah, I would have come for both of the sessions there. That's fantastic. But the chutzpah to actually get him and some of the others to get on board. It sounds to me like that's a crucial ingredient in getting this right.
So there's a thing called a query letter, which I read about before. It's an international thing. It's a 3-paragraph, 1-page pitch that probably would work for any industry. Film, I believe in, I've spoken to Gordon Froud, that artists don't know how to market themselves because they're busy painting pretty pictures. So there needs to, and because I had so many years of marketing experience that I had to apply to myself, I wrote those query letters the beginning of 2018 on Twitter. That's how I got my 1,500 followers. To Pit Mad, they've got pictures all over. I wrote to agents of things like Jonathan Safran. They say, look at the book and decide who it's like. It's like this, it's like that. It's like Rushdie, it's like Fouer. And found those agents and wrote to them as if they were my BFFs. How's it? Nicole, everything, like Nicole wasn't interested in me. I've got about 75 rejections. So I was by the time the book was coming out, and by the time that I connected with the ability, because I asked someone who knew Stephen, if I may contact him because I'd like him to read my book. It was a modest request. I then realized I could ask him for an endorsement. So in my 3 paragraphs to him, it was like 40. They talk about Picasso taking half an hour to make a painting, but he spent 65 years getting to that half an hour. I think that my query to Stephen was 45 years of advertising experience and a lot of chutzpah, and the ability that if he didn't respond, I tried. So there's a lot of, I kind of like the risk of that. I'm a risk taker. I wouldn't be in business for myself if I wasn't. So I took the risk, I took the chance, and now we have a very sincere Menchie email relationship, and with his sister as well, who does the hard graft behind his hail fellow well metness. He's amazing, but she finds the lost keys and stuff like that. So I've developed a relationship with the most famous British Jewish comedian in the world, and I still can't believe it. But I was ready for it. I think desperation plays a part, when you really want someone to want it. And it was nice to have, if anything's happened in the last 5 years, I've calmed down about what fate holds in store. I'm not in control of it. It will happen or it won't. You hacked me to come on to Chai FM and Chai FM and Chai FM. And I was like, oh, Benji. And we're practically in business together because your brain is the size of the planet. So you never know what you'll find when you reach out. And please, overcoming of fear, I think, is the biggest thing for a writer of everything, is what will they think? Will they like it? Will they hate it? It doesn't matter. Stephen Fry likes it. It's really what else counts.
Fantastic. So, by the way, if you're watching this, you're more than welcome to have a look in the chat. because you can see the book at Mujaji Books, and you can also do an email order to Ort through Ort. So if you want to order it through Ort, that is also a great opportunity. I have a copy. I can recommend it. So do have
wait. Before you say can recommend it, Benji, you interviewed me, and then you put it onto, is it Israel Times on a blog? Tell us about that. Just from your side of finding this crazy author. Just give us a little bit of that, because you really did.
So I mean, maybe it's interesting to talk about that. And Lynn, you're not supposed to do this. I'm the interviewer. But yeah, because I mean, I have a radio show and we're on High FM. But the truth is that if you just focus it on radio, whoever's listening at between 9 and 10 in the morning on a Monday will like it or not like it. So in order to find ways of getting it out there, I put it up on the Times of Israel blog, which then people really appreciate it because it's a new platform and other people see it. And in fact, in this particular case, it was one of the most successful posts I've done, not only because I think, Lynn, we got over 100 shares, which is pretty good for, yeah, that's right. Which is, I mean, unless you're sort of writing something scathing about Moching or something, it's, this is for literary fiction. It was a very good set of shares for posts. And we actually got picked up by an Israeli publishing reviewer who said, "Oh, that's fantastic," and they got hold of you. So there's a great ecosystem that came just out of having that discussion.
Absolutely. So I'm sorry to turn the interview back on you, but I think in light of what you said about social is your friend, is making connections with people who connect with the book. I mean, you almost like, well, you're like a mentor to me in a field I don't understand. Maybe we both don't understand it, but there's engagement. I'm not in the dark room anymore. I've got to go back in the dark room to write my next book. But this is about, Renelle and I are trying to have coffee together. One day we'll get it together, because I really want to hear what she says. And yes, maybe when it's, world famous and Nobel prized and whatever, I wouldn't have time for that. But I feel a sincere, genuine connection with people who have loved the book. So it's bringing a new sense of joy into my life. So
talking about that, and I see Leanne has just left us, but she enjoyed it, so that was good. If you're listening to this or on the webinar, then I'm assuming you either have read the book or want to read the book or want to learn the lessons. And we've been talking now for 48 minutes of our allotted sort of hour and a half. So if anyone would like to take the opportunity to ask some questions, you can type it in the chat, or I can even, I'm actually not the host, so I don't know if I can actually unmute you, but and you can maybe just post it to Tracy and she can unmute you. But if anyone has any questions, I think this would be a great time just to further out the discussion and just get people's, if they have questions or inputs or anything really that they want to ask in terms of the discussion at the moment. All right, so we have our first question. Thank you, Carolyn. How is it funded?
That's how was what funded? So I paid for my own university. The business, if you want to call it, funded me. So it kind of sponsored myself, if you want to call it that. And then I paid the editor, because I got an editor before a publisher, which again is a South African thing. Normally, if you get a publisher, the publisher gives you the editor and then the editor edits. I had done the edit because I knew when I left university, I knew it still needed another draft. So I paid the editor because she and I were working on it together. And then when it gets to publication, there are certain things the publisher pays for, if you like, the printing of the book, the distribution of the book, the cover, all of the actual pieces that go into the physical book. And I, during COVID, amassed myself a small fund because I couldn't go anywhere or go to expensive restaurants. So I amassed a bit of a budget to be able to do some of the marketing. So it came, again, if I was 25 years old, it wouldn't be the same. But I had a strong business out of which I could fund this book, and maybe they'll balance at some point. But thanks, a good question.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Renelle. You see, now Renelle and I are BFF lovers. I know her grandchild. I know you know, it's a beautiful thing, and she loves Wanda. And Renelle, is Renelle allowed to speak? I mean, can we make them speak? Can you talk? Can you?
I mean, I mean, it's not up to me. But
They
Tracy,
are unmuting themselves. Yeah.
Oh, you can unmute. Okay.
Yes.
So, Renelle, if you want to talk to us, we're very happy to hear from you. Even better if you can turn us on.
Turn us on. She doesn't want to speak. You don't have to speak. Oh, there's Lauren Joy. Now you see Lauren Joy. Are you coming on?
Hello, can you hear me?
You are.
Yeah, we can hear you. How's it, Lauren?
Oh, good. Sorry, I've got a mouthful of ice cream. I got to tell you, please don't tell your fairy godfather, but I've really made better inroads into your book than I did into Mythos.
I'm typing to you now.
Absolutely amazing, because I have to keep stopping to research. I mean, half the stuff I didn't know. So it's learning a whole history, and I would have been able to name the muses. So I'm loving that about the book, that it forces me to do research of my own.
But you see, Lauren, and that's interesting, because some people give up because it isn't all self-explanatory. And I think the purpose of fiction is to make you curious, to find out what's going on.
Absolutely. There was a Tom Robbins book. I think it was Half Asleep in Frog's Pajamas, and part of it took place in Israel and Palestine. And part of it was really real. He spoke about Gold Star beer and Maccabee beer. But then he also said that the palace was named after a god whose head was a donkey. And I walked around Israel looking for this god. But of course, that was absolute nonsense. So it's really nice to find the history so you can separate the fact from a fiction. And then you find how the author has played with you. I mean, when you plucked the G string with aham, aham, I was finished. So I was finished for about half an hour, and I'm sorry I couldn't get back to that.
It's an interesting combination, because people have asked me before about all the research, but I had to make sure that it was historically accurate in its kind of setting, and then be extremely silly. Also bringing in somebody said to me, have I ever been to, for example, to Russia? I haven't, but I have spent a winter in the boot of a car in Canada, because we couldn't afford a motel. So I know how cold it is. So there's something about my own life. You know, I don't know Zenobia, Queen of Palmyra, but, you know, in my attempts at semi-sexualism, I could tell you who it's named after. So in a sense, it is a combination of experience, the ability to write, imagination, and a lot of research, and then making it look easy.
I love it, and I love your sense of humor. Thank you.
Oh, Lauren Joy. I'm coming to Cape Town. I'm getting in the car now.
Don't come. I've got a list of tidal pools in the still summer.
Bring.
I see we've got a couple of other comments here. First of all, thanks, Lauren. That was great. Janet Marks is saying that's great to see you, which is nice. And just talking about the process to write and publish your book. So thank you, Janet. We appreciate that.
I want to say one thing about Janet very quickly. Janet Marks is, firstly, she's my heroine. I met Janet through the Raza Reading Association of South Africa, which is now called Litaza. And I want to tell this to Janet and you all, because I have FOMO. I can't miss out on anything. And I was just at the beginning of 2015 when I started writing, there was a Raza AGM, whatever it was, and I was maybe going to be the treasurer. I was going to be kind of put on the Va'ad. I was going to be voted onto the committee. And I was walking up and down outside in my garden, and my husband said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm just going to pop in to the Raza AGM." And he said to me, I said, because maybe I can be on the committee and all of this. And he said to me, "What part of you writing a novel do you not understand?" And because he's an ex-academic, and, you know, he's always bullying me. And that was why, Janet, you haven't seen me for 5 years, because it was literally, I had to make the choice. And I want to be involved in the world outside, and I had to make the choice to focus inwards. So I don't have FOMO anymore, but I would still like to be considered as the treasurer. But I was meant to write the book. That it was my time to write the book, if anything. It was my time.
So Martin Hatchell has a question. Lynn, I've just paid an editor and had a middle of the night panic attack. Does this mean the editor is on my side or on the side of the book? What was your experience?
I just have okay. Martin Hatchwell and I were at camp together when we were at camp, and I use the word advisedly. Martin, the editor agreed to work with me in the first place because she saw something in the book that she thought she could help me raise. So, but I know of unfortunate experiences with editor. I think the editor has to get the book. Alison got the book. She got it. And in fact, she was more than just an editor. She helped me to develop the novel. And in fact, I call her the novel whisperer, because there were things I couldn't see. So I think that to your point, and also, and this is something that happened with Jill Noodleman, who's just finished her doctorate, also writing creative writing, is that she was dealing with the Brits. And the Brits, my book is not really a South African book. I mean, I'm a South African writer, but it's not about South Africa. But I also understand that editors from elsewhere may not understand the ethos and the kind of origin of yourself. But my answer is, if the editor doesn't love the book and want to help you with the book, don't use them. And I think you would know that they have to be. Oh, I see. I know Martin's going on. I'll speak to you separately, Martin, because I know your nature extremely well. It does. If the editor has to be on your side, the answer is, of course, the editor must be on your side, or fire them. Are you doing nana duty? But what I will want to say is that I don't think that anyone should ever consider publishing a book unless they have had an editor. My book would have been embarrassing for me to have published before Alison helped me and assisted me and bullied me in the night and was there for me on weekends and could be with me. She was actually traveled the road with me all the way. And still
Thanks.
does.
Carolyn has another question. Just wants to know the actual process of writing the book, which it's funny, we've done a book interview, Lynn, for an hour now and haven't actually spoken about, well, other than the MA, but the actual process of writing the book. So talk to us about that. I think it is
I'll tell you, yes. So my process. Okay, firstly, read about other people's processes, which is very assuring in a way, because even Stephen, what's his name? The horror writer?
King.
Stephen King writes 1,000 words a day. That's it. When he's done his 1,000, he goes off and he does his other thing, and 1,000 becomes 5,000 a week and 70,000 in 70 days. And there he has a draft. I spent the first year of the MA writing character. That was all I did. I channeled this creature who sat navel gazing. In the second year, I was told there's not enough plot. So I went kind of James Bond on her ass, and there had to be action. And in the third year, I sat down and pulled this together. Then in the fourth year, Alison and I began again, so to speak. So to me, character is everything, but character without plot. In fact, again, Kurt Vonnegut is my hero. Every single sentence in the book has to do one of two things: advance the character or advance the action. Explore the character or advance the action. If it isn't doing either of those things, get rid of it. Kill your darlings. So Wanda happens to be quite a verbose character. She's effusive, effluent, eloquent, all of that. So every word in there is still there for a reason. But the actual process is sit down on your ass in the morning before doing anything and sit at that, whether you're inspired, whether you're outspired, whether you're expired, sit down and write. And tidy it up and move on. There's a very good book called Bird by Anne Lamott, who speaks about literally one scene at a time. She talks about 1 square inch. Just write that scene. Write it, tidy it up, move on. And read it back the next day. So you're actually accumulating. It's a gangane, step by step. That was how it was for me. And you have to be able to read your work. If you can't read your work, and cringe. And then you have to be able to evaluate your work, which is why I did the MA. Some of it makes me cry, some of it makes me laugh, some of it makes me cringe. But I think that as you write, I think you become aware of the worth of your words. Yeah. So
Lynn, I just want to stop you there and just say that people can order the book from this webinar. Tracy can maybe add in the chat just where you can email. The book is 295 Rand. And if you order it off this particular session, Ort will get a 45 Rand off every item sold. So I think a really great opportunity to support an author, to support a book, to support an organization that does really an enormous amount of work in our community. I can tell you for a 2-minute pitch that if it wasn't for Ort, I wouldn't be sitting here doing this, because Ort were the people who helped my family get out of Europe. And then they were the people who helped my grandfather go to what they then called trade school. And that became the family business for 70 years. They employed my mother and my father and all my aunts and my grandfather, other grandfather and my grandmother, and but not me, because the one thing I didn't get is an aptitude for woodwork. But Ort really does some amazing work, and really I think that it's a completely incredible organization and really well worth a donation. And in fact, if they have that poll up there, I think it's a fantastic opportunity just to pop it up there again if we have it, just to if people would like to make a donation, because it really is a fantastic organization and does amazing work. So if you have that opportunity, buy the book, make a donation, do both. Buy the book, give it to someone for Passover, because in fact there is a Passover element to the book as well.
Chapter 1. Indeed. Yeah, exactly. Oh, indeed. And I also want to do a shout out to all of the Ort people. You work so hard, and the other thing is for you people, for the Jewish people on here, it's a Jewish organization, but its shoots go far beyond just the Jewish people, which is a feeling that I feel for myself as well. Is, as a Jewish person, I kind of have a responsibility to the world outside my so-called faith or culture. And I really, Ort has been around for 100 years, right? And you do amazing work. And I just want to praise you and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so there we go. And then we have 140 years, Tracy says.
It's almost as old as I am.
Brunel is also posting one of her reviews, which is fantastic as well.
I adore you.
So yeah, so people loving the work, loving the book, and loving the work that's going on. And you know, there's a lot of other great work.
If only Brunel wrote for the New York Times.
I'm sure she might.
And she may well.
Well, I think I think that that's. I mean, there's other people have questions. I think that's probably a good place to leave it, Lynn. I know that you and I, if we start getting talking, that can hours. There'll be something else which you'll have to read. But so maybe it's an opportunity, Tracy, if you want to just close us off.
Yes, thank you so much, Benji. And